Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'm hosting tonight's show. Up first here, the show times 5:30 p.m. for KUAC 9.4, 360 North 7:30, and get back on the screen here on the right side, APB 5:30 p.m. and Alaska Public Media 5 a.m. the following morning. And for satellite imagery, yesterday we had some clouds here pushing off to the east, easterly flow across the interior, upper level low here over the southeast Bering Sea. Really not doing much more than producing clouds and a few scattered showers. Massive moisture there south of Kodiak Island, and a pretty nice day here across southern Alaska. A few more clouds right in that area, and then clouds tend to increase as you go north. A front approaching the western Aleutians right in this area here, mostly pushing off to the east, and then that big storm that brought the 60 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts across the southeast coast, moving quite rapidly northward with the main low center tracking off the coast, and that's what brought the high wind warnings into the area. And today that mostly has gone on up into western Canada, and another system, this one down here, came up to the north and brought some rainfall, mostly rainfall in across the Panhandle. Heaviest amounts in the south, anywhere from about an inch falling at Wrangell, which isn't quite in the south there, it's a little farther to the north, but Craig, Klawock picking up about 0.6 of an inch of rain, and otherwise lighter to the north. Juneau received 1,500. So those are amounts since midnight last night. Isolated showers around Kodiak. Otherwise we had this area of snow from northern Cook Inlet, Flurry's Anchorage, increased to about maybe an inch or two up into the Susitna Valley. Hatcher Pass, I believe, picked up 3 inches of snow, and some of that extending off to the east, and kind of a widespread area of light snow across the Alaska Range into the Tanana Valley, and then off to the east. Dries out farther north, and then flurries and patchy fog along the Arctic coast and locally over the North Slope. Out to the west, northeast flow coming out of the Chukchi Sea here through the Bering Strait, south across St. Lawrence Island. Showers mostly in the form of snow up in this area, then they become mixed down through here. Mostly just rain showers and pretty gusty northerly winds here, gusts 40, maybe 45 miles per hour there across central Aleutians. Lighter winds here for the Alaska Peninsula. This system tracking by to the south, really not having much effect there at all yet. Otherwise, for tonight, we'll see it still stays to the south, pulls to the east a little bit here, but the main gradient still even away from the marine areas. Otherwise, a partly to mostly cloudy night for Kodiak with a risk of, and some light rain and snow continues here for the North Gulf Coast, mainly Prince William Sound areas there, especially on the west side with this southeasterly wind flow and a band of moisture extending southeast along that trough axis. That'll continue to feed on up to the coastline, but no heavy precipitation expected with that. Mostly dry Copper River Basin. Now just some lingering snow along the Alaska Range here after midnight. The main area of snow edging its way northward, so beginning to taper off there across the Tanana Valley areas, but continuing across the Yukon Flats, probably up across Arctic Village to the eastern Arctic coast, drawing out to the west with some possible clearing there, say maybe the Kobuk Valley, Noatak Valley areas, and then a band of light snow along and off the coast there on the west side. Otherwise, not much change here. Still northerly winds starting to diminish a little bit here through the Bering Strait, but probably not anything you'd notice. And they continue to blow down across the Aleutians, but the entire pattern shifting eastward there, so it'll begin to lighten up here for Atka, especially Adak, with higher pressure building in out to the west, breaking the conditions there. But the next system just coming onto the edge of the chart. This map good for about 3 a.m. tomorrow morning actually, and that pushes eastward with gale force winds, rain spreading in to AKwx in the afternoon, and otherwise that high pressure area weakening and pushing eastward. Winds will begin to diminish late in the afternoon across the western Aleutians, but pretty windy conditions there for the Alaska Peninsula, not all that windy, but with this low pressure area tightening the gradient up, so the winds will be on the increase for Kodiak Island, and with that east-northeast flow, maybe picking up a few showers in that wind field, bringing them on mostly in toward Fogneck Island along the east side of the island, and maybe some flurries here for the western Alaska range, and that's about it. Back to just a partly to mostly cloudy condition across the interior, light winds, some flurries scattered around. Same pattern you've seen up along the North Arctic coast there. Winds pretty light up in that area. And for the Panhandle, as this front approaches the Queen Charlotte's, that'll pick the winds up on the south coast tomorrow. Showers, best chance of rain will be on the southern Panhandle, probably dry to the north. And then for Monday, that front moves on up. Good gale force winds in the forecast for Clarence Strait, 35 to 45 knot winds along the Panhandle there with rain and turning more easterly, but not gale force here, looking, I believe, at 25 knots for the Gulf of Alaska as rain edges westward from Yakutat to about Cordova, but Prince William Sound remaining dry throughout the day, as well as the Copper River Basin. Could see some sun breaks here over Cook Inlet, as well as the valleys. Otherwise, really not much change. Again, partly to mostly cloudy, variably cloudy, with some scattered flurries around the interior. No significant snow expected for the next several days. And even up on the Arctic coast there, most of the flurries now appear that they'll probably be off the coast with light winds, dry conditions, and temperatures really not all that bad. Pretty mild for this time of the year. Out west, pretty strong low out here over the southwest Bering Sea. And that front pushes eastward, really not racing eastward, but that'll bring wind and rain into the eastern Aleutians. Could be a narrow band of gale force winds here across the Fox Islands. Probably you'll see gales for the Pribilof Islands with rain. Definitely a good shot of rain ahead of this front. And then it's looking like storm force winds for St. Matthew Island, but much lighter for St. Lawrence Island. And then some good northwesterlies wrapping back in around this system, sweeping in from the northwest, turning west. A lot of rain and snow and fog, and looking at pretty good gales, 35 to 45 knots out there, so possible gusts to 50 to 60 miles per hour, mostly back to the west, but gradually edging eastward. And then the front here in the Gulf of Alaska backing in towards Kodiak, so northeast winds, a little on the brisk side there. Chance of rain right along the east coast of the island, pushing northward, so again Cordova, and as I mentioned, the Panhandle looking pretty wet for Monday. Temperatures down that way today, mostly in the upper 40s there across all of the southeast coast, with 47 at Annette and Sitka had 48, 49 up at Skagway, 42 over Cordova. Much chillier up in the Copper River Basin, lower 20s up in that area. Upper 30s to lower 40s here for the Kenai Peninsula, cooling to 35 at Palmer, 30 degrees Talkeetna with the snow, lower 40s there across Kodiak Island. And north of the mountains, all in the teens. Snow falling across this area today, anywhere from ½ inch to maybe 2 inches in some areas. Not all that heavy, but at least it's something. Mid-teens there, Fairbanks and Tanana, 17 at Delta. A little cooler to the north, 11 degrees at Bettles. Fort Yukon, 12. 1 below zero at Arctic Village. And kind of a range here if you're away from the coast. Teens, but out there at Barrow, 23 degrees, 21, Kotzebue and Point Hope, 25, both sides of the peninsula here, Shishmaref and over at Nome, 32 at Gamble, and temperatures in the right around 20 here over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Valley areas, with 21 at McGrath, 23 down at Bethel, mid-20s out along the coast, and for Bristol Bay, 30s, lower 40s for the peninsula, all the way across the entire Aleutian chain. And lows tonight out there, really not much different in the lower 40s, lower to mid 40s, so really not looking at much of a temperature change at all overnight tonight. 40s here for the peninsula, upper 30s, pretty mild for Bristol Bay, and lower 30s all the way up there actually to Wales, Tiller and those areas, 20s off to the east. Coolest zone up there again across the Brooks Range, and otherwise pretty mild lows in the lower 20s there for the central Arctic coast and a tad cooler to the east. High temperatures tomorrow, single numbers and teens, again right along the Brooks Range there. It looks like Anaktuvuk, high of 4, and that's a cold spot. Otherwise mid-20s there for the Arctic coast, so not much of a day-to-night fluctuation there. Upper 30s, Bristol Bay, and again 40s for the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Call it mid to upper 40s for portions of the southeast coast, and 30s for the south central Alaska. Flying weather tomorrow, could be some isolated areas of IFR here along the southern and southeastern slopes of the Alaska Range. Otherwise, marginal VFR through this portion of the interior on out into the eastern Bering Sea. Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula looks pretty marginal. All of the southeast coast for tomorrow morning has marginal VFR, as well as the north slope to the Arctic coast. And for tomorrow afternoon, quite an increase in the IFR up here to the north, especially along and north of the Brooks Range, but and again on over to the eastern Arctic coast, otherwise marginal. A lot of VFR here over the central interior, marginal conditions for Prince William Sound, and marginal VFR into the central and southern southeast coast. So the northern areas look like it'll be pretty good VFR, and really not that bad out here over the Bering Sea until you get into the next system coming in with some IFR, but that's just a narrow band there dragging across the far western Aleutians. And for passes, Anaktuvuk, Adigan, VFR could be something lower on both northern entrances. Adigan, we'll go for marginal there. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, good VFR tomorrow, as well as rainy. And for windy, VFR, Isabel, IFR. And for Mentasta, we'll go VFR, Tanita, VFR, Portage, marginal, and Isabel, VFR, possibly becoming marginal into the afternoon, maybe. And for the freezing levels at the surface here, all the way down to the North Gulf Coast, northern Bristol Bay, and then 2,000 feet across the southern Bering Sea, right across the northern southeast coast, warming to about 4,000 feet there as you get down toward Dixon Entrance. So taking a look at the icing, really not a lot tomorrow with the moisture here. Prince William Sound on up into possibly the Copper River Basin, above about 4,000 feet, areas of light rime icing with that. This area pretty much staying off the coast there, so icing free across the Panhandle. Up north, nothing of significance, and from the western Alaska Peninsula across the Fox Islands there on Alaska and Nikolsky, could be some icing above about 4,000 feet, and then probably a more extensive, significant area here coming into the western Aleutians. Upper level wind flow chart, the trough out here near, centered near Kamchatka, southwest winds 150 knots. That's bringing that next system in. Otherwise, the other side of the ridge, northwest at 120. Coming across, say, Atka Island, gradually shifting eastward. Not much wind flow at this elevation across the interior. And up along the Arctic coast, you got some southwesterlies up to 55 knots. 9,000 feet, northerlies 40 knots, Kamishak Bay. Right down across Kodiak Island, easterlies 30 to 35, northern Gulf of Alaska, southeast 25 to 30 for the Panhandle, lighter inland. Light variable winds over much of interior Alaska, actually all the way up to the Arctic coast. So at 3,000 feet, looking at about the same pattern and not much different in the wind speed as well. Very light and variable here across the interior, right up to the Arctic coast, even down in toward the North Gulf Coast here. Then you pick it up about 20 knots there for, say, the Barren Islands on out across the Gulf to the southeast coast. Northerlies 25 to as high as 40 knots here. Sailing down the Bering Sea across the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And then the big winds out west with the next storm, we're looking at about 50 knots here, but that's way out there towards Shimei and Attu. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop here from, say, Seldovia, maybe Kachemak Bay, down across Kodiak Island, east side of the Aleutian Range, Alaska Peninsula, right out to probably Nikolsky, and maybe a little bit here through the Bering Strait and St. Lawrence Island, but really nothing significant at all. And then some moderate chop coming in with those stronger winds out over the western Aleutians from Attu over to about Kiska Island. And this area, mostly off the southeast coast here, could start picking up a little bit rougher conditions, especially for small aircraft from, say, Sitka on down across Heidelberg. Otherwise smooth over the interior. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
There's a big investment here. Between the ship and its cargo, we're talking millions of dollars. Ensuring that it all arrives safely at the next port is a heavy responsibility for the captain and crew. Once clear of inshore waters, there's not much between the ship and its destination, except weather. And it's weather that makes ocean shipping a dangerous business.
61.0 west at 12/1500.
What's got me is just the speed, how fast it's going. It's going real fast, and they usually don't build up.
No, then you're going to dissipate somewhere along the line.
See, because it says here even 3 days later, it's still only going to be at 80 knots.
The only thing you can do is
just keep going the way we're going.
Even with the latest electronic equipment, anticipating changing ocean conditions remains a challenge. Weather is estimated to be responsible for 80% of all losses at sea. So, for the mariner, timely and reliable weather information is crucial.
Despite the technological advances made in marine forecasting, there remain only 3 basic sources of data for the marine forecaster. 1 are buoys, 2 are the satellites, and 3 are the ships at sea. And when the clouds roll in, obscuring the satellite's vision, and you move offshore out of the buoy's range, there remains only the ship reports to provide the cornerstone for the forecasting process.
The only effective way to obtain real-time local marine weather information is by reports from ships at sea. And that's the job of the Voluntary Observing Ship Program.
De winden gehad en als wij dus door Eren heen gaan, worden de winden noordoost.
The providers and users are found aboard ships operating on all the world's oceans.
The VOS program is a surface data acquisition program under guidelines established by the World Meteorological Organization. It's the largest observing program in the world with 1,600 observing platforms maintained by the U.S. on board moving ships, 7,300 ships worldwide operating in the program.
Weather data from ships is collected and analyzed at the National Weather Service's National Center for Environmental Prediction. Forecasters use ship data to develop the high seas forecast. Sometimes it's the only data available.
This guy right here averages about 3 high, so it looks like he's a 28, but he's actually like a 25.
The National Weather Service VOS program generates just under 400,000 ship reports annually. Worldwide, all VOS programs together produce about 1.3 million ship reports annually.
In the United States, the VOS system is coordinated by port meteorological officers.
Hey, Jim, how you doing?
Pretty good, how are you?
Long time no see.
Yeah, it has been a while.
Officers like Jim Saunders recruit and train marine weather observers.
Yeah, we're just talking about the tropical storm Barry coming up here. And,
They maintain the equipment and are continually seeking ships and volunteers. The VOS program operates at no cost to the vessel. Communications charges, observing instruments, and reporting supplies are furnished by NOAA's National Weather Service.
There's no adjustment needed, so perfect, good shape.
Bound from New York to San Juan, Puerto Rico, the Sealand Consumer is a typical ship participating in the VOS program. Its crew knows the value of an accurate high seas forecast.
Well, I'm the chief mate on this ship, and I've been going to sea for approximate 40 years. You know, you're out here at sea, and you want to know what's going on, because your life and the safety of everybody depends on it, like this. Cargo, of course, and the whole ship. If you don't know what the weather is doing like this, you might be in a heap of trouble, especially nowadays where everything is bound by time. We are like a railroad, everything is on time, so it's important to know what the weather's like.
Reliable observations are key. Good data from ships means good forecasts in return. So accuracy and attention to detail are critical.
There's 2 important things when you submit shipboard meteorological data. One is accuracy and the other is timeliness. If you put in bad data, you're going to get a bad forecast out. If you trust somebody else who's put in data immediately prior to yours because you don't want to go out and under the bridge wing and observe the swell or the sea state yourself, then you're trusting in that person. And that isn't the real data that's happening right now. Timeliness is extremely important in submitting your data. If it's late or you've saved it for the next report and putting two reports into the same time, then your synoptic value is totally lost. The idea is to get your report in as close to the synoptic hour as possible.
Weather data is normally transmitted to the National Weather Service 4 times daily, corresponding to most weather prediction model runs.
These reports are submitted in Zulu time or Greenwich time or Universal Time Coordinator, whichever term you want to use, but they're submitted at these synoptic hours every 6 hours all around the world the same time, so that when Klaus Mueller is taking an observation in Germany on board his ship at 0600 Zulu, John Thompson in the Pacific is also taking it at 0600 Zulu, and those times are exactly the same. So no matter where you are in the world, the synoptic time will remain the same, and the data taking time is exactly the same for everyone.
Welcome back. Look for southeast winds 25 to maybe 35 knots here along the coast, turning more easterly up to the north. Seas running 10 to 17 feet. Lynn Canal, north winds at about 24-foot seas, and back into the southeasterlies here for Stevens Passage, down across Clarence Strait, 30 knots. And then those pick up to 35 knots for Monday here, and some pretty good gales here on the south coast, actually full gales for the central coast. Southeast, 40 to 45 knots, 20 to 23-foot seas. East, 35 on the extreme north coast, and northerlies up to 30 knots, especially for northern Lynn Canal. And that same wind pattern right on down to Stevens Passage, or through Stevens Passage. Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound tomorrow, northeast 15, 3-foot seas, 20 knots here, pick up to 25 there for Shelikof Strait. Small craft advisories, Kodiak Island and the Barrens. Easterlies 20-25 for the North Gulf Coast with 8-foot seas. And for Monday, small craft advisories edge it up a little though, 30 knots with 18-foot seas for the North Gulf Coast. No change for Prince William Sound or Cook Inlet, the Kamishak Bay North 15. Small craft advisories for Shelikof Strait, as well as the east side of Kodiak Island. And for Bristol Bay tomorrow, north at 20. 25-knot winds on the north side of the peninsula here become gales on the south side due to that system off to the southeast and the tightening pressure gradient. And then for Monday, now the 35-knot winds from Castle Cape up to Sitkinak. Out of the north, a little lighter, but not much here across the peninsula, except the north side down to 15 knots. And for the eastern Aleutians, northwest, 30 tomorrow with 14 to 17-foot seas. Adak and Atka, 20 to 25-knot westerlies. Not too bad there, but then back into the gales here west of Adak, and that rises to about 40 knots there toward Kiska, Shimei, and Attu. Then Monday, west, 45 knots, almost a storm, but not quite. Seas at least 24 feet. And then westerlies at 40 here coming into Adak, 35 to 40 knots. And then turning southwest, 35 knots. And then 30 knots, actually, surprisingly, in advance of the front. Winds are lighter and then pick up off to the west. And then for the southwest coast, north to northeast, 15 to 20. Small craft advisories for St. Lawrence Island and also for the Pribilofs there with 8 to 10-foot seas. And then for Monday, southeast gales come into the picture for St. George and St. Paul, and storm warnings out for the northern Bering Sea, St. Matthew Island, but only 25 knots for St. Lawrence Island on down here to Nunivak Island. Arctic coast, pretty light winds, especially on the central and east coast there. East to north in direction, but very light, slight seas, maybe up to 4 feet in the east side. 20 knots from Cape Beaufort on down to Wales. Actually pick up to 25 knots here for the Chukchi Sea. And then those drop back 20 knots the next day for Monday here from Wales to Cape Thompson. Pretty light winds though, west-northwest for the entire Arctic coast. Seas down to 2 to 3 feet. For tonight, again, the area of snow dissipating here and just some flurries or very light snow along the Alaska Range after midnight. This area kind of shifting northward, so tapering off in the Tanana Valley, but continuing through the Yukon Flats there all the way out to the eastern Arctic coast. And of course that means IFR up in that area. Gusty north winds and showers here for the northern Bering Sea, right down across the Aleutians, and less in the way of rainfall here for the southeast coast. And for tomorrow, this front and storm system tighten the gradient up across Kodiak Island, but for the most part it looks like the rain staying off to the southeast. Could show up in the afternoon, could see rain swing up there, but definitely more of an increase in the winds than precipitation. And for the southeast coast, again, the gales going there. Showers mostly over the southern areas, variably cloudy over the interior with a few scattered flurries. And the next system pushing into the western Aleutians on Monday pushes gale force winds again to the Pribilof, storms for the northern Bering Sea, 30-knot winds for the Fox Islands with rain. Cool and dry over the interior, and rain and wind, gale force winds, gusts to 50 miles per hour, maybe 60 there for the southeast coast. Otherwise, south central Alaska looking pretty good. Partly to mostly cloudy, a few breaks here, especially over the Susitna Valley. Copper River Basin dry, and again, Bristol Bay looking really good, light winds and fair skies. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Coming up next on 360 North.
It's really exciting